Welcome, travelers. The lights are dimming, but the story remains. Tonight, we drift across the forgotten heartland of Cyrodiil, where chapel bells fade into mist, and stone roads remember the weight of vanished kings. The night is long, the fire is low. Let us begin. Rain whispers against the timber eaves, a soft cadence rising and falling over the wooden bones of the chapel. Candlelight stutters across old stone, shadows bending around weathered tapestries, depicting drakes crowned in flame. Beneath, the sanctuary breathes in low hushes. Monk robes rustle, a quiet psalm stirs like breath held too long. The hearth glows, not from flame, but from an embered quiet, a warmth inherited, not lit. Brother Aulus, aged but not frail, moves along the loft with an oilskin bundle in his arms. Each step on the wood creaks like confession. He does not shiver, but his breath fogs before him. Below, the nave lies empty, the pews rows of mute sentinels. The dragonfires burn in a sealed crypt beyond, unseen yet deeply felt, like the pulse of a sleeping god. Outside the stained glass windows, the world is a blur of rain. Somewhere far beyond, a bell tolls once, its echo riding the night's mist from the imperial city. Brother Aulus stops beside a small altar set within the loft, places the oilskin bundle down, and unwraps it with the care of ritual. Within lies parchment, old, but inked just yesterday, a decree, a root, a warning. He reads without speaking, then presses a trembling hand to the amulet seal at the page's crest. His lips move, not prayer, not vow, but memory. Downstairs in the cloisters, a door closes without footsteps. Outside the walls, the priory's orchard weeps in quiet rain. No torchlight breaks the mist, no horses stir in the stables, but something watches, a flicker behind branches, a shadow without source, the kind of silence that listens back. Back in the loft, Brother Aulus gently folds the parchment again. His hand pauses mid-motion. A single droplet, not rain, lands on the wood beside it. He does not look up. The priory bell tolls again, lower now, as if something beneath is being heard for the first time. And then silence, as if the night itself has stepped through some unseen gate and paused. The sky above the imperial city bled gold as the sun slipped behind the Gerald Mountains, casting long shards of light through the clouds like ancient spears of judgment. The white gold tower, center of all things, drank the last of the day's fire. Its stone shimmered, not from the setting sun, but from within, a quiet glow born of ritual, lineage, and a promise carved into the marrow of the world. The empire still stood, and yet something shifted. The dragonfires burned in their sacred chamber, not like hearths or torches, but with a living stillness. The flames neither danced nor roared. They held, steady, eternal, or so it was believed. Uriel Septim the Seventh walked the hall with no guard, no herald. Only the hush of dusk accompanied him, draped over his shoulders heavier than any cloak. His breath was slow, measured, not tired, but weighed down by the shape of things to come. He paused before the fires. They did not bow, did not flicker, but something in the room knew him, or remembered. The amulet of kings rested where no dust dared settle, red as old blood, gold as oath-bound flame. Its facets caught no reflection, yet each angle hinted at something deeper. Not a jewel, a tether. His hand did not reach for it. Beyond the walls, bells began their slow lament from the temple district. One long tone, pure, unbroken, drifted up through the mist, arriving in the sanctum as if it had travelled from another age. The kind of sound that hangs in the chest rather than the ear. The Emperor closed his eyes. A name stirred behind them, one that had not yet been spoken, one that the world had almost forgotten to remember. He turned, walking back the way he came. The fire behind him held steady, but in its center, just once, a thin tremor passed through. No one saw it, but the chamber remembered, and far below, in the city's oldest alley, a beggar looked up without knowing why. The light on the tower seemed different, dimmer, like something sacred had turned its face away, just for a moment, and the wind shifted. Beneath the floor of the tower, where roots of stone twined with the deep silence of centuries, a corridor stretched like a wound carved into bedrock. Few knew of it. Fewer still walked its length. Tonight, footsteps stirred its dust. They were not hurried. They were not heavy. They were inevitable. Uriel's path led him to a door, carved not with names, but with patterns older than script. Each swirl, each sharp cut, echoed a story once sung by tongues that no longer drew breath. He placed a hand against the center. No spell, no command. The door unsealed like a held breath, finally released. Within, a smaller chamber, circular, unadorned, waited. A single brazier glowed, untouched by time, its coals a soft orange that suggested memory, not flame. And at the chamber's center stood a pedestal of obsidian glass, reflecting nothing. Upon it lay a scroll, tightly wound and bound by a red ribbon. He hesitated. For all the titles, all the bloodlines, all the temples and coronations, this moment had no audience, no script. It was only him and the knowledge that the world's rhythm was faltering. And he was the only one who heard it. His hand hovered above the scroll, not out of fear, but because he already knew what it would say. Outside, above, the sky continued its slow shift. The gold had faded into iron. Clouds gathered, though the air remained still. Not a wind, not a breeze. A pause. In the barracks, a captain of the blades stared at the edge of her sword longer than necessary, waiting for an order she hadn't yet received. In the arcane university, a scholar's quill stopped mid-sentence. A word had fled her memory. A word she used often, but could not now recall. She stared at the parchment, heart suddenly uncertain. In the temple of the One, a novice monk forgot a verse halfway through morning chant. He finished it with an invented line. No one corrected him. Above it all, the tower watched. Uriel's fingers touched the ribbon. It untied on its own, as if welcoming an old friend back to his burden. The scroll opened. There were no runes, no cryptic markings, only words plain as stone. He will come without title, without father. The blood will know him, but he will not know it back. The fire will break, and from the ash, judgment. He closed his eyes. This was not prophecy. Prophecy could be bargained with, interpreted, debated. This was echo, something already spoken, waiting for its shape to be found in the waking world. The amulet still rested above, in its cradle. But even it could feel the silence beginning to change. Not louder, just closer. The amulet pulsed once, softly, like a final heartbeat behind silk. High above the sanctum, in the tower's narrow spire where stone gave way to air and sky, ravens circled without sound. Their wings moved against the windless dusk, tracing slow spirals, their black forms indistinguishable from shadow until they banked toward the light. Then, For an instant, each eye glimmered red. The guards on the upper parapet did not see them. One leaned into the cold stone railing, helmet tucked beneath his arm, watching as the horizon swallowed the last seam of sun. He was young, not yet hardened into ritual, and his breath clouded in the evening air. His hand drifted unconsciously to the hilt of his blade, not in readiness, but instinct, the kind that stirred when something changed behind the veil of ordinary things. He couldn't say why, but the tower felt taller tonight. Not proud, not grand, exposed. Below, in the library of scrolls, parchment rustled without touch. 1,000 sealed truths lined the walls, each hidden behind wax, oath, or forgetting. A keeper lit a lantern, though she could not explain why. There was no dimness, yet she felt watched by the very shelves she guarded. One scroll, second from the left on the third tier, had begun to split at its seal, just a hairline crack, nothing more. But it hadn't been there the day before. Far to the west, across the quiet plains of Cloven, thunder rolled where no storm had been forecast. A single strike, distant, unclaimed. Back in the tower, Uriel stood once more before the Dragonfires. His eyes held them now with sorrow, not reverence. "I have never doubted you," he whispered, though the chamber was empty. "I only doubt what waits when you are gone." The flames did not respond, but the warmth shifted, not colder, not yet, just unfamiliar. In a lower corridor, unnoticed by sentinels or scholars, a mouse darted across the stone floor. It paused by a grate, whiskers twitching. From deep within, air moved, slow and low, like a breath drawn in by something vast and just now waking. The mouse fled, and high in the spire, the ravens scattered. In the temple district, as dusk gave way to full night, the bell ringers prepared the third tone. 3 was the number of fire, of oath, of the Septim line. Tradition held that the third bell rang clear, unwavering, a single perfect note that echoed from the Temple of the One to the furthest edge of the market green. It was the city's heartbeat, bound to the hour, the Emperor and the divine flame. Tonight, the tone faltered. It was imperceptible to most, a ripple, not a break, but to the eldest ringer, whose hands had struck bronze for 40 years, it felt like a tooth knocked loose in the mouth of a god. He did not speak, only turned to his apprentice, confused but unwilling to confess it aloud. And below them, the priests continued their chant, but their words, for a single moment, felt unmoored, syllables echoing in strange rhythms, as if hearing themselves from far in the future. Across the imperial aisle, dogs lifted their heads, not barking, just listening. And at the waterfront, a lantern slipped from a fisherman's grasp, breaking on the stone with a hush of oil and flame. He swore, but quietly, unsettled, as if speaking too loudly would invite notice from something watching just beyond the veil of rain. Back in the tower, Uriel removed his crown, not for ceremony, not for sleep. He set it beside the amulet. It clinked softly, a sound no scribe would record, but one that echoed in the chamber like a seal being pressed. The room, ancient as it was, seemed to recoil, not in defiance, but mourning. The Emperor turned, eyes scanning the chamber, as if expecting to see someone who had not yet arrived. He did not look at the amulet again. He did not need to. The tether still pulsed, but now it beat against resistance. From a window facing east, a red bloom appeared on the horizon. Not fire, not storm, just color. New, unnatural, and waiting. There was a dream the emperors once shared, passed quietly from sovereign to heir, recorded in no archive, named in no rite. It came only once in a reign, and always at dusk. In it, the tower stood hollow. No fire, no throne, just wind whistling through bones of stone. Uriel had dreamed it 4 nights ago. He had not spoken of it. Not to his advisors, not to the blades, not even to the scroll that now sat sealed again in the chamber below. But it lived behind his eyes now, in every echo of his footsteps, in the hush before every breath. He did not believe the dream was false, only premature. At the university, a young novice burned her notes, not in error, but because the ink had changed. Her records of sigil geometry, stable and rote for 3 years, now carried curves she had not drawn. One line had begun to spiral inward, chasing itself like a snake with no head. She could not remember writing it. North of the city, a courier's horse refused to cross a bridge. No matter the prodding, no matter the promise of oats. The wind under the arch howled like it was falling, but no one else heard it. In the tower, Uriel stood at a window and watched the sky. The red bloom on the horizon had not grown, but it had not faded either. He placed a hand over his chest, feeling for the amulet's echo. It did not answer, not because it had gone cold, but because it now listened to something older. His lips moved, a prayer perhaps, or its memory. The line of Septim stretched back unbroken through war, flame, betrayal, and miracle. But now, in this narrow hour between sunset and night, it felt like a rope pulled too tight across a void. He knew he would not sleep, not tonight. And somewhere beneath the tower, unseen and unspoken, a rat crept along an old tunnel and found a stone it could not pass, warm, humming, and breathing. The final candle in the tower guttered, not extinguished, but bent low, as if the flame itself bowed beneath the weight of what approached. Uriel stood in the Hall of Lineage, a room seldom entered outside of coronation. Its walls bore murals too old for the fresco style, colors made from ground stone and dragon bone lacquer. Each emperor of the line stood there, not as portraiture, but posture, each gazing forward, never at the viewer, each depicted mid-deed. Uriel looked not at his forebears, but at the space after his own unfinished image. It was blank, not white, not marked for preparation, just untouched. The silence in the chamber was complete, not sterile, not sacred, just waiting. He turned slowly, robes whispering across the floor, and stepped back into the corridor. Behind him, the hall remained lit, not by fire, but by something slower, the memory of illumination. Elsewhere in the tower, a guard posted outside the emperor's quarters watched the torches flicker. Then still, he blinked, rubbed his eyes. The flame hadn't moved. It was frozen, but when he reached for it, the heat scalded his hand. He said nothing, but he did not draw his sword. Some things armor does not answer. At the city's edge, a temple acolyte woke without knowing why. His mouth was dry. His first thought was of sand, the kind that never belonged in Cyrodiil. Red, curling sand, like the memory of a place that would come later. In the tower, Uriel returned to the sanctum one last time. He stood before the amulet, before the fires, and in the breath that passed before the bell could toll for midnight, something within the Dragonfires sighed. Not extinguished, not gone, but tired. A pulse slower than it had ever known, and the Emperor closed his eyes. He did not say farewell. He did not bow. He only stood still and let the night finish its sentence. The marble hall beneath the Elder Council chamber was colder than usual that morning. The sun had not yet cleared the horizon, but white gold towers' upper tiers caught a pale light, dull and flattened by heavy clouds coiled over Lake Rumar. Wind dragged rain across the terrace in thin, shivering veins. Inside, torch sconces hissed low. Their flames curved toward the stone, as if recoiling from something about to arrive. The guards did not speak, not from discipline, from instinct. The Emperor had delayed his procession. His steps were not late, but measured differently, and in the delay the hall held its breath. A whisper of silk moved through a side corridor. The clink of steel paused, then resumed. In the sanctuary corridor, high near the chamber's throat, where echo lived longer than memory, a faint rattle stirred, metal on stone, but muffled, not loud, not panicked, deliberate. A moment passed. Then another, then the sound again, but closer, and this time behind the guards. One turned, too late. The blade passed under the collar, not deep, but sure. A hiss of air left the man's mouth, as if he'd only been startled. Then came the blood, slow and thick, catching torchlight with the color of wine aged too long. The other guard reached for his horn, but a black-gloved hand found his wrist first. Then the edge found his throat. No shout, just a single vowel, cut off. They fell almost quietly. In the chamber above, Uriel Septim VII opened the doors himself. He entered in silence, as he always had. His crown was absent, not from forgetfulness, but from ritual. The amulet lay beneath his robe, pulsing once with the crossing of the threshold. The Elder Council rose. He lifted one hand. They bowed, but they did not yet sit. One man did not rise. He was younger than the rest, his skin pale, his robes modest, his eyes already fixed not on the Emperor, but on the far wall, as if expecting it to open. Uriel saw him, a blink of recognition, then a breeze. There should have been no wind in the chamber, but parchment stirred on the table, and the flame in the chandelier above bent low toward the ground. The door behind the throne creaked and broke. Not open, apart. A figure passed through, not cloaked, not armored, but robed, red, deep, layered in pattern that hurt to follow. His face was calm, his hands empty. Behind him came two more, then four, then the chant. Soft at first, one line, repeated in a language no one had spoken in public since the Temple Wars. Uriel did not move, but the amulet beat against his chest like a second heart. He stepped forward toward the figure in red, and the figure raised one hand, not in threat, in reverence, then thrust it forward, and the blade that had been hidden in the folds of his sleeve caught the light and vanished into the Emperor's body like water into stone. Blood touched the floor, and everything broke. The blood had not yet cooled. It traced the inlays of the marble floor, spilling into the carved sigils beneath the throne. Symbols meant to channel blessing, now choked on their own red echo. Uriel's Septim the Seventh lay not slumped, not collapsed, but folded, as if some divine seam had been unstitched mid-breath. His eyes remained open, not wide, simply unfinished. The Amulet of Kings rolled once across the floor. Its glow did not fade. It shimmered. Then it stopped. Not dark, just still. Around it, the chamber fell into collapse. Guards poured in. Steel met steel. The red-robed intruders did not flee. They formed a circle, a wheel of movement as deliberate as ritual. Each wore the same smile. Not joy, not victory, only clarity. One was cut down, his blood painting the ceiling with the force of his fall. Two more followed, but not before one of them reached the amulet. Fingers touched gold, and the room dimmed. Every flame bent in toward the center, drawn by some unseen pull, not extinguished, but consumed. The walls grew darker, the sounds louder. Stone echoed like water in a broken basin. The man holding the amulet fell, not from blade, from impact, as if the relic itself had rejected his grasp. But when it hit the floor again, the pulsing had not returned. In a side corridor, a servant boy who had only entered to refill the water basins stood frozen. He watched the guards cut down the last of the intruders, his hands trembling against the tray he no longer held. Something inside him whispered, "Run." But his legs would not obey. His eyes, drawn by something he couldn't name, fixed on the still form of the Emperor. And then, with dread he could not explain, to the man slumped near the throne, the one who had first raised his voice. The man was not dead. He was smiling, even as the blade passed through his throat. His smile deepened, and with it, something cracked. Not in stone, not in air, but underneath, deep beneath the tower, where the foundations touched old things. A tremor passed. A soundless shiver, felt only in the bones, and in that moment the Amulet of Kings dimmed, not extinguished, but unanchored. The Dragonfires did not go out. They shivered, and in that shiver the world forgot how to hold still. In the Temple of the One, flames leaned sharply westward before vanishing altogether. Priests fell to their knees, not in prayer, but reflex. Their tongues failed them mid-chant. One clutched the front of his robe, convinced his heart had missed a beat it would not recover. In the arcane university, a soul gem shattered. It had not been touched. It had not been flawed. It simply knew. Across the water, in the shadow of the walls, a woman washing linens at the edge of the canal looked up. She felt it in her teeth. Something had been removed. Not stolen, removed, as if the space it once filled had never belonged to it. And in that space, cold crept, not weather, not wind, but the kind of cold that thinks. Back within the tower, a ring of guards surrounded the amulet. They did not speak. One reached for it. The captain stopped him with a glance. "Wait." It was not a command. It was a question, and no one answered. Then a voice rose from the far door, not loud, not armed, not even meant to carry, but it cut the air like fire through silk. "Where is the heir?" The councilmen, those who remained, turned as one. No one moved. No name was offered, because there was none to give. In the rear hallway, someone ran. Not a soldier, not a noble, a stable hand, breathless, drenched from the terrace, shouting a name none of them knew. "Martin! Martin! He's in the chapel! They say he's healing. They say he wears the face." He didn't finish the sentence. The door behind him closed without sound, and was never seen again. The council chamber fell quiet. One of the old men, nameless, hooded, drew a line in the air with his finger, a sigil of warning, of warding. It dissolved, and the silence thickened. The amulet had not moved, but its glow was different. Not dimmer, not brighter, empty, and somewhere far beneath the tower, in stone corridors long sealed by time and fear, a voice without breath whispered a line no mortal had spoken in 2 eras. "The seal is broken." Storm banners writhed over the spires of the temple district. They snapped with unnatural force, though no wind blew. Their cloth bore the twin dragon sigils of Raymond and Alessia, now twisted, stretched into silhouettes against the greyed sky. Lightning had not struck, but the smell of it threaded the air. Ozone laced with copper, sharp as cut stone. In the crypt vaults below, the blades gathered. They had not been summoned. They had simply moved, all at once, as if a bell had rung only in their blood. Each entered without word. Steel was drawn, but not for threat. Each sword was placed across each warrior's knees as they knelt, head bowed, waiting. Only one remained standing. Captain Renault. She did not kneel. She did not blink. She stared at the far wall, where a tapestry of Tiber Septim in ascent now curled at the edges, blackening at its corners, as if exposed to heat that none could feel. She whispered, "Who inherits a broken seal?" Her words did not echo. They landed, a weight, not a sound. Miles away, beyond the heart of the city, in a forgotten chapel ringed by yew and shadow, a man laid hands on a bleeding soldier. His palms burned, not with flame, but with the ache of memory, too large to be his. He did not know why it hurt. He only knew the wound closed when he asked it to. The priests called him blessed. He did not correct them, but he did not believe it either. That morning, when the sky cracked and the tower's flame faltered, he woke crying, and did not know whose grief he carried. Martin. The name was whispered first by a street orphan, who had overheard a courier praying to a man who was not yet a saint. Then, by a mage who saw a vision of red tides folding inward over the imperial isle, and in the center, a figure who did not know his name. Then, by a general, then by a prisoner, and by nightfall, by a raven on the battlements, who did not speak, but carried a feather the color of dawn ash, and dropped it on the steps of the Temple of the One. It landed, and did not blow away. Back in the council hall, the amulet of kings remained untouched, but a hairline fracture had formed in the stone where it once pulsed strongest. Not a break, not yet, but the beginning of one. Night fell unevenly over the imperial city. The clouds held no rain, yet the streets gleamed as if washed. No footsteps echoed. The stones, once warm with the pace of commerce and chorus, now listened. They waited for a sound that no one was ready to make. In the tower, the hall of relics stood open. It should not have. Doors sealed by oath and magic had unlatched, not from force, but from neglect. As if the moment the amulet ceased its song, the protections folded like wings. Inside, wind moved among glass cases and chained scrolls, and in one corner, an altar of obsidian stood bare. The relic it once cradled, a shard of Reman's crown, rimmed in meteoric iron, had cracked during the hour of assassination. No one noticed until morning, when a novice found flakes of black metal drifting like snow across the marble tiles. He swept them with reverence, though he did not yet understand what had fallen. In the imperial sewers, deeper still, a blind priest touched the tunnel wall and wept. He wept not from pain, but recognition. He had heard the sound once before, in a forgotten dream, the moment a gate opened that should never have been built. It had not opened yet, but the hinges had remembered. Above ground, the flame atop the Temple of the One burned blue for 7 seconds. Not long enough for alarm, long enough for myth. And in the barracks, where soldiers relaced their armor with trembling hands, one man carved a sigil into the underside of his shield. A glyph not taught, not shown, one seen only in the edges of vision, when the dragonfires flickered in the sanctum years before. He did not know why he drew it, only that his hands moved as if remembering something older than him. At the arcane university, a scholar finished a letter and marked it with wax that would not seal. She tried again, then again. The wax refused the stamp. It peeled upward, rejecting the sigil of the empire. She burned the parchment and turned to the east, whispering a name that had only reached her through a dream born on thunder. Martin. And the candle beside her flared, then went still. The amulet was gone, not shattered, not stolen in chaos, simply gone. It had been sealed within triple steel and elder sigil, guarded by hands sworn to die in its defense. But by dawn, the case lay open and silent, its wards unbroken, its hinges untouched. The guards had not slept, yet none had seen, and when asked what had happened, each gave the same answer. I turned, that's all. In the center of the chamber, where the amulet once pulsed, dust floated. Just that. Sunlight found it through the high windows, and it turned slowly, as if suspended in the breath of something invisible, and watching. Word traveled like a shadow down stone steps, crossing through the arcane halls, through the council's teeth-clenched silence, down the river banks and into the alley mouths of the poor. They did not ask where the amulet had gone. They asked why it had left. In the Temple of the One, the elder priests met without chorus. No chant, no bell. One read from a scroll none had touched in 200 years, the Oath of Holding. Its first line had faded. Its last, had rewritten itself. He tried to speak it aloud, and forgot how the words began. Across the lake, in the village of Waynon, a monk awoke before sunrise and collapsed mid-prayer. He spoke a name as he fell, one not written in any temple ledger: Martin. He had never met the man. He could not say where he had heard the name, but he knew, as sure as marrow, that it was the answer to a question the world had only just begun to ask. By midday, a rumor carried through the city like mist, shapeless, clinging, half seen. The emperor was dead, the amulet was lost, and the last of the bloodline did not wear the name he was born to. Somewhere in a forgotten chapel, a man sat by a dying candle. He did not yet know that the world now curved toward him, but the flame beside him flared once, then steadied, and the air drew inward, as if preparing to speak. Kvatch slept on the spine of the Gerals. Stone terraces curled around the mountain like ribs, holding roofs of slate and clay, beneath a sky still dark from the Emperor's death. Morning had not yet broken, but the fires had. In the chapel of Akatosh, incense still clung to the rafters, sharp, spiced with resin and wine ash. Candles burned low, not out of reverence, but depletion. The priest who lit them had not returned. The last sermon sat unfinished on the pulpit, a sentence interrupted mid-word. And outside, the first scream rose. It was not near. It came from the sky, high and distant, shrill, layered, wrong, as if the air itself was remembering pain it had not yet felt. Birds lifted from their nests, spiraling outward in flocks that broke apart mid-flight. On the western wall, the guards did not shout. They stared. The horizon had cracked, not in light, in shape. A ring of stone stood where no structure had been the night before, black, rooted in nothing, suspended over the ground by lines of red that bent upward like claws. Fire laced its rim, not burning down, but pulling upward, as if flame had become hunger. Then came the smell. Sulphur and iron, as if the breath of a forge had poured through a grave. It rolled down the slope, curling into the city's lower levels, seeping under doors, whispering up stairwells. And with it, the second scream, closer, not from above, from within. The gate bloomed. Light tore open the stone circle's core, revealing not another side, but another place. Basalt fields, storm skies, towers of brass and bone. Creatures like bone-clad wolves stepped through, dragging scent and sound with them, talons scoring the earth, eyes pulsing with lines of fire that curved like runes in pain. Kvatch did not fall. It was pierced. The first Clanfear reached the gatehouse and shredded the wooden shield wall with one leap. The guard who raised his blade did not have time to cry out. His sword struck the creature's shoulder and shattered. The chapel bell rang once, then never again. In the apse, Martin Septim knelt beside a wounded child. His hands trembled, not from fear, from recognition. He had seen this place, not Kvatch, the gate, in a vision, in blood. He could not say, but he had known the shape of it, the clawed crown of stone, the scream, the air breaking like cloth torn crosswise. He touched the boy's forehead. Heat radiated from the skin, fever but not of flesh. "Hold on," he said. He did not know if the words were for the boy or for himself. Outside, the chapel doors rattled. Dust rained from the ceiling. Ash began to fall through the windows, not grey, but black and red, curling like the remains of burned scripture. Then the sound came, a rhythmic, metallic pulse. Boom, boom, boom. Not footsteps, heartbeats, but not human, and getting closer. The gate pulsed, not once, but continuously, like a lung that had never exhaled. The space around it warbled with heat, not warmth, but pressure, a wrongness in the air that blurred sight and thinned sound. Wind moved in slow spirals, up and inward, as if drawn toward the stone moor, now rooted in the earth. From its center poured motion. The Clanfear moved in bursts, 4 limbs splayed for speed, horned crests quivering as they caught the scent of prey. One leapt from a ruined stairwell and crashed through a stained glass window, trailing shards and smoke. Below, the market square was no longer square. It had collapsed inward, stones uprooted, stalls overturned, statues broken. A brazier lay on its side, coals scattered across the flagstones like divination, cast and misread. 2 guards stood between the creatures and the inner gates. Neither fled. They did not win, but their blades carved time. A few more breaths for the families scrambling behind them, hands clutching children and sacred tokens as if they could trade one for safety. The first of the guards fell, torn in 2. The second screamed not in pain, but rage, and threw himself forward into the beast's throat. Steel and fire met in silence, and in the chapel Martin stood. He did not pray. There was no time. He walked to the altar, past the rows of empty pews, past the wounded and weeping, past the spilled bowl of consecrated oil, now slick across the stones. He reached for the ceremonial torch, not to light it, to carry it, its brass shaft, etched with the dragon sign of the divines, warmed in his grip, not from flame, but purpose. Outside, a survivor burst through the front doors. His eyes were wild, blood on his chest, not his own. "They're coming," he gasped. "They're already here." Then the sound returned, that same rhythm, boom, boom, but louder now, heavier. From the gate, a new shape emerged. It did not run. It strode, taller than any man, plated in obsidian, with eyes like sealed scrolls glowing through slits in its helm. In one hand, a blade shaped like a broken jaw. In the other, fire, not thrown, held. Martin stepped forward, only a few feet. He did not shout. He did not command. He raised the torch, and the creature paused, just once, just long enough to look directly at him, and smile, though no mouth could be seen. Then it charged. The chapel walls trembled. The sound of the charging creature, part steel, part thunder, filled the nave before it ever crossed the threshold. The wind rushed in behind it, hot and serrated with ash. Martin did not retreat. He did not speak. The torch in his hand flickered, then steadied. The flame curved forward, drawn toward the gate, as if the fire itself remembered where it came from. The creature slammed into the doorway. Stone cracked. One pillar fractured at the base, sending a tremor through the structure that caused the high stained glass to shiver. Light scattered across the floor, red, gold, violet, then vanished beneath a spreading shadow. It stepped into the chapel. Every step it took rang twice, once in the ears, once in the bones. Behind Martin, the wounded shifted. One moaned, one cried out, a child. Another reached for him, begging. He did not turn. The creature lifted its blade. And then, from the rear door, a second figure appeared. Not robed, armored, a soldier, soot-streaked and bleeding, bearing a weapon already dulled. She did not look like a savior. She looked like someone who had simply decided not to die yet. She shouted, once loud, and threw her blade. It spun end over end, clattering off the creature's helm. It did not pierce, but it interrupted. Long enough. Martin stepped forward, just once, then again, and with both hands he drove the base of the torch into the stone between them. The flame rose, not in heat, in height. It stretched upward, a column of fire without smoke, golden red and full of a shape that should not have lived in this world. The creature faltered. Its eyes flared wider, and for a moment the entire chapel was lit from within, every window a mirror, every stone a reflection. The gate outside pulsed in reply, not louder, but longer, and the creature stepped back, just one pace. It did not fall, but it left, not fleeing, withdrawing, as if re-evaluating. Martin collapsed to one knee. The flame vanished. Ash fell in silence. And outside, the first sounds of reinforcement echoed. Horses, steel, orders shouted from throats that had not yet tasted fear. The breach had not closed, but the first answer had been given. The chapel of Akatosh stood half broken, half burning. The pews had splintered. Ash drifted in slow swells from the high windows, but for the first time in hours, there was no scream, only breath. Martin leaned against the altar, palms pressed to its worn edge. His skin stung where the flame had licked him, though no fire remained. His eyes were distant, not lost, listening. Footsteps echoed behind him, boots on stone, fast and steady. A woman entered. She was young, cloaked in dust, armor cut from steel not forged in any court. Her sword was not ceremonial, it was used. She moved like someone who had chosen the fight long before it arrived. He turned, their eyes met. No introductions, just recognition. "You were the priest," she said. He nodded. "And now, I'm something else." The sentence hung there, unfinished, too large to claim, but not false. She stepped to the door. They've held the square, barely. The thing retreated. Martin followed her gaze. Beyond the chapel, Kvatch smoldered. Smoke curled through alleys. The sky had darkened with no storm clouds, just shadow, and something waiting. "What was it?" she asked. He answered too quickly. "Oblivion." Then, slower, "I think." The silence that followed was not empty. It was thinking. Martin looked down at his hands. The skin was raw, not burned, but rewritten. as if something had passed through him. "Your name?" she asked. He hesitated. "Martin." A pause. "And you?" She looked back toward the gate. "Doesn't matter yet." They walked out into the square together. Survivors had gathered in clutches, leaning on broken carts, pressing cloth to wounds, staring at the place the gate had opened. No one touched the scorched circle in the stone where it had stood, not even the guards. One old woman dropped to her knees and whispered a prayer, not to the 9, to whoever had stood against it. Martin did not hear her words, but he felt them, like heat returning to ash. The gate had not closed. It breathed, and with each breath, the city bent closer to collapse. Smoke curled backward into its core, as if the world on the other side had lungs of its own. Heat bled through the stone, warping it, darkening the earth around its roots. No wind passed it. Birds gave it a wide orbit. Even the insects kept their distance. Only one figure approached. His armor was scorched, one greave broken, his left eye swollen shut. But he walked, each step measured, not brave, necessary. He had no title, no prophecy, only resolve. The guards tried to stop him, not with force, with words. "You can't. No one's come back through. The last man..." But he passed them. Martin watched from the chapel steps. His breath slowed as the figure entered the gate, swallowed not by light, but by color. Red, orange, the blue of storms behind black glass. Then silence, and the gate flared once more. On the other side, the hero ran, not with elegance, with refusal. The landscape was cruel, razor-topped ridges, soil that hissed underfoot. Daedra stalked its ridges, watching, not hunting, testing. The tower loomed at the center, twisted, alive. Its roots were not buried, they writhed in air. From its crown poured fire, not down, inward, feeding a heart that pulsed in wrong rhythm. He entered. The climb was chaos. Ash fell like snow. The stairs cracked under his weight. The doors screamed when opened. But he did not slow. At the summit, the chamber of origin, the sigil stone hovered. It pulsed like the amulet once had, but colder. He reached. The light pierced him, not in pain, in memory. Every breath he'd drawn, every moment of doubt, every death he hadn't prevented. They passed through him, not to punish, to weigh. He did not let go. The stone came free, and the world tore. Outside, the gate imploded. Sound rushed inward, then outward. Stone cracked, air bent, and when the wind stilled, there was no gate, only silence, and a circle of scorched earth that steamed in the morning light. Martin did not move. He watched the man return, limping, bloodied, carrying the stone. Their eyes met. Martin did not speak, but his shoulders set, not in pride, in readiness. The ruins of Kvatch did not burn any more. They smoked. The heat no longer raged, but settled, clinging to broken stones, curdled glass, and blackened iron. The wind returned in uneven draughts, tugging at the edges of banners too torn to carry a crest. Among the rubble, survivors worked in near silence, lifting stone, binding wounds, counting names. No one called it victory, only pause. In the chapel square, Martin stood alone beside the circle where the gate had been. Ash had settled there more thickly than anywhere else, as if the earth itself had exhaled. He bent down, ran 2 fingers across the soot, brought it to his lips, breathed in. He did not cough. He did not flinch. He closed his eyes and saw flame behind them, not wild, not chaotic, structured, like a language waiting to be spoken aloud. The hero who returned from the gate had not rested. He stood near the chapel, speaking with the soldier woman who had first drawn her blade. Their words were short, urgent, already preparing for the next motion. Not celebration, continuation. Martin turned from the circle and walked to the altar, now rebuilt with stones from the tower above. It was rough, but standing. He knelt, not as a priest, not as a prince, as witness, and whispered something no one could hear. The sky above Kvatch lightened. The sun, unseen for days, found its way through the haze. Its light caught on a shard of broken glass, still lodged in the chapel's doorway. The shard gleamed red, then gold, then clear. Martin rose, not taller, but steadier. And when he stepped into the street again, those around him made way, not because he asked, because they felt it. The world had shifted, and it had placed weight in his hands. Pale Pass bore no banners. Snow fell in long, slow veils, unbroken by wind. Pines stood like frozen sentries, their boughs burdened by silence more than weight. The path twisted between cliff and ravine, each curve edged by stone that had never warmed. There was no gate, only absence, where something had once been watched, judged, guarded. Through this hollow pass rode 3 figures. No torches, no sigils, only the sound of hooves in snow, and the soft chime of gear shifting in packs. At their head, a woman, blade across her back, cloak sewn with ash at the hem. Behind her, a knight bearing an unpainted shield. Last, wrapped in the thick robes of a healer, the man who no longer spoke his name, unless asked. Martin. He had not protested the journey. He had not asked where they went. Only once had he spoken, when the snow thickened and the trail vanished into white. It's always colder when they're near. The others had not asked what he meant. By dusk, they reached the outer ridge. Below them, Bruma, stone-ringed, fires flickering behind high windows, smoke curling like thought through the mountain air. The city was preparing. It did not know for what. It only believed it should. They descended in silence. At the gates, no challenge, only eyes. The captain of the watch opened the bars with hands that trembled too little to be fear. More like reverence, the kind that doesn't know whether to kneel or salute. Within the walls, the blades waited. Not all, but enough. Armor engraved in draconic script, faces closed, not because of secrecy, but because each expression was a kind of oath. One stepped forward. She removed her helm. The same woman who had watched the amulet vanish from the tower's chamber. Renault. Septim, she said. It was not a greeting. It was a weight. Martin nodded, but he did not claim the name. Renault turned and led them inside. The blade hall beneath Bruma had no echo. Sound struck its walls and stayed, as if reluctant to leave. Iron hung on the racks, not polished, not decorative. Each blade bore a name not etched, but remembered. Training dummies lined the far wall, gouged and darkened. Between them, parchments curled at the edges, war accords unfinished, maps scribed by trembling hands. Renault stood by the central table. She did not offer chairs. The room did not permit comfort. Around the table stood 5 others, mages, mercenaries, scouts, 1 imperial scribe, all with different colors stitched into their sleeves, none with the same accent. They watched Martin, not with awe, with calculation. He offered no speech. He placed the sigil stone on the table's center. The air recoiled. It pulsed once, softly, like heat without flame. The table's ink shimmered, as if uncertain whether to stay on the page. One of the scouts took half a step back. Renault didn't move. She looked at Martin. "So it's true," she said. "You brought back fire." Martin replied, "I only carried it." The mage to his right snorted. "And we're to believe that is all it took?" "No," Martin said. "It took a city." The silence that followed was not tense. It was weighing. Renault spoke again. "Bruma can hold the first wave, not the second, not alone." She gestured to the maps. "The gates are spreading. Skingrad, Coral. Reports say even Leowin's air has begun to burn. They're probing, not invading, not yet." Martin asked, "What will you do when they stop probing?" Renault answered without pause, "We'll die, cleanly and late." Martin turned to the others. "Then we build something that won't die." They did not nod, they did not cheer, but the room changed, and the map between them felt closer to truth. Snow gathered at the edges of the war hall windows. It did not fall with grace. It drifted sideways, caught in the teeth of a mountain wind that remembered how to carve stone. The light from the sconces flickered more from breath than flame. The parchments were spread now, 1 for each province, 1 for each order, 1 for the future, unmarked but circled in red wax. Renault tapped her gauntlet against the northern quarter. "We'll need the companions, not for numbers, for memory." The mage beside her, pale-robed and sleepless, shook her head. "They'll follow only their own. Nord blood runs cold for emperors." "Then make them warm for something else," Renault replied. Martin listened. He did not interrupt, but he reached for the map's southern edge and drew a slow line from Bruma to Pale Pass. The fire mage watched him. "Dangerous," she said. "That path isn't guarded. Hasn't been since Riemann." Martin looked up. "Then it remembers us." A murmur passed between the group. Not dissent, not assent, just motion. In the courtyard above, blades trained in the dark, no command, just repetition, steel striking wood, wood cracking in rhythm. One soldier paused between forms and looked toward the citadel. He saw no figure in the window, but he felt one. Inside, the final scroll was sealed. The accord bore no crest, only the mark of the blades and a sigil not yet written in ink. but already spoken in fire. Martin's hands did not tremble as he touched the wax. He looked to Renault. "To make this real," he said, "we'll need them all." She nodded once. "And if they won't come?" He answered without pause. "Then we go." The summons were sent at dawn. They did not ride with banners. They rode alone, through Pale Pass, across Vallis Ridge, into the folded woods of the West Weald, couriers wrapped in grey, carrying sealed scrolls that bore no seal, but flame etched into wax. Not all would answer, but all would feel it. At the Arcane University, a master of alteration read the scroll 3 times. He said nothing, then handed it to his apprentice, whose fingers trembled as she held it. She did not know why she wept, only that it felt like a beginning. At the Fighters' Guild in Coral, the parchment was burned before it was read aloud. A veteran, scarred and one-eyed, leaned over the embers and said, "That's enough." 2 hours later, 12 fighters mounted without orders. In the Temple of the Nine, the scroll was placed at the feet of an ancient statue, Saint Pelinal, arms broken centuries ago in war. A priest touched the page. Then the statue cracked, just once, a sound like ice shearing from mountain stone. In Bruma, Martin stood in the citadel's upper chamber. The wind had carried the last of the smoke away. The sky was clear and still. Wrong. The air held that same weight as it had in Kvatch, that breathless tightness before flame, before decision. Renault joined him at the parapet. "They're coming," she said. Martin nodded, then whispered, "So are we." Below, in the snow-swept yard, the blades aligned in 2 rows. Behind them, mages, then swords for hire, then pilgrims who carried no weapons, only torches. A formation not of rank, but need, and together they waited, not for permission, for direction. The gates of Bruma opened without fanfare. No horns, no cries. Just the slow creak of iron pulled wide across frost-slick stone, as if the mountain itself were granting passage with caution. The first to step through were not knights. They were scouts, wrapped in furs, faces unreadable. Each carried a staff carved with notches for every province crossed, none with the same pattern. Behind them, the blades, steel at the hip, fire at the edge of each eye. Martin followed on foot. He did not ride. Renault rode beside him, but said nothing. She understood the weight of appearances. He was not a monarch in exile. He was a flame still forming shape. Snow fell again, lighter this time. Dust, not burden. Ahead, Pale Pass waited. They would march east, then curve south through Skyrim's teeth, where the old borderways twisted under wind-sculpted stone. No map would chart it cleanly, but their purpose did not ask for clean. In the rearguard, a mage whispered to her companion, "Why not wait? Why not gather more?" The answer came not from a commander, but from a mercenary with no badge. Because the gates don't wait. The line moved, through the pine-thick trail, beneath the cairns left by soldiers centuries gone. No one touched them, but each passed with a nod. Every hour, more joined, A band of hunters with bows strung in silence. 3 monks, barefoot in snow. A child riding a sled pulled by a wolfhound, offering flint and bread to every soldier who marched near. And above, on a cliff, an eagle turned once, then followed. Not overhead, ahead, towards something unseen, but felt. They reached the summit just before dusk. The trail flattened into a wide shelf of stone, flanked by broken pillars whose carvings had long since blurred beneath wind and time. Snow gathered in their grooves like ash caught in script. Nothing sacred stood here anymore, only memory. Martin paused at the edge. From this height, the spine of Cyrodiil unfurled in grey and white. The shadows of distant cities folded into the land, their lights too faint to name. Beyond the horizon, red flickered low in the clouds. Another gate. Renault joined him. Her cloak snapped behind her like a second voice, but she said nothing. Below them, the columns settled for the night. No fires, just huddled bodies, whispered drills, blades checked in silence. Martin knelt beside the stone outcrop. He pressed one hand to the rock, felt its cold, felt its stillness, then whispered, not prayer, not spell, only intention. We are coming. Behind him, a torch was struck, but not raised. It stayed low, carried by a child who had walked the last 4 miles barefoot. She placed it beside a cairn at the camp's edge. Its flame leaned forward and held. One of the monks began to hum, low and slow, a cadence older than empire. Others joined, not many, not in time, just enough to bind the quiet. The wind did not rise, but it shifted, as if something else now breathed alongside them. And down in the pass, the snow fell differently. It didn't hide. It revealed stone paths, buried arches, old sigils etched in frost, and the way forward. Bruma did not wake to horns. It woke to tremor, not above, below. Stone whispered against stone. Snow shifted from rooftops where no wind stirred. In the upper tier of the city, a smith's anvil rattled on its mount. A boy dropped a pail of water, not from fear, but from knowing. The gate was coming. They had seen it in other cities, always smaller, always sudden. This was not that. This was prepared. From the tower above the chapel, Renault watched the southern rise. The ridge was quiet. No ash, no fire, but the air bent. She turned to the page beside her. Signal the line. The boy did not answer. He had already gone. Below, the city moved like a body that had learned pain. Gates barred, shields raised, torches doused. The northern square, newly fortified, was ringed in 4 arcs of defense, archers on scaffolds, mages with charged stones in slings, fighters at the ready, with spears planted deep. Martin stood among them. He had not taken command, but the space around him held like a center. At his hip, a blade newly gifted, Daedric forged, yet cool to the touch. He had not tested it. He would not need to. The first light appeared at midday. Not from the sun, from beneath the ridge. A vertical seam split the ground with a sound like 1,000 doors unlocking. Fire bled through, not bright, but structured, lines of crimson forming runes no mortal tongue could pronounce. Then silence, not stillness, a pause. Then the gate opened. Not like the others. It did not ripple or flare. It unfolded. Stone curled backward like flower petals carved from obsidian. Heat rolled outward in pulses, each one louder, sharper, faster. The mountain flinched, and then it stepped through. Not a creature, not even a titan, a tower. Walking, its base struck the earth and split it. Its spine arched into the sky, crowned with chains that dragged lightning in slow, deliberate arcs. The great gate had opened, and behind it, something larger still waited. The first tremor passed like thunder through the souls of every fighter in Bruma. Not a quake, a footstep. The Daedric siege tower moved, not fast, not clumsy, but with purpose. Each stride gouged the earth, tearing frost-slicked stone into glowing channels. Fire trailed in its wake, not wild, but bound, curling in spirals across its metal hide. It was not empty. Within its crown, a light pulsed, a heart, a forge, a sigil stone, vast, living, watching. Martin stood at the line. His voice was calm. He did not speak loudly. He did not command, but the ranks leaned toward him, as if drawn by gravity. "Do not stop it," he said. "Draw it." The signal flags snapped. Archers loosed. Bolts struck the tower's flanks, most shattered on contact. Some sank with no visible mark. A few pierced joints between plating and hissed sparks, like wasps waking something far too large to care. It did not halt, but it turned toward the line, exactly as they had hoped. Renault stood at the second tier with her shield squad. "Now," she whispered. Two mages stepped forward, palms scribed in runes burned into skin. They thrust both hands toward the ground. Ice erupted, spikes of frozen air, tall as spears, burst from the soil beneath the tower's right leg. It stumbled, not fall, but a moment of imbalance, the kind war lives and dies by. The fighters charged. They struck low, axes biting into seams, ropes catching along the joints. One man leapt and drove a pick into the lower hatch. The hatch opened, and was not empty. Daedra poured out. Not Clanfear, not scamps, knights of ruin, plated in molten red, blades shaped like flame condensed into form. They met the charge with no battle cry, just motion, steel on steel, fire on breath. The line held and bent. And behind it all, the tower took its next step, toward the walls, toward the gate, and toward the heart of what must be held. The ground no longer shook with steps. It thrummed, a subaudible cadence, not sound, but pressure, vibrating through shields, through snow, through the joints of every man and woman who still stood. The Daedric tower neared the inner gate. 2 more strides, and it would reach the wall. 1 more, and it would erase it. Renault climbed the western rampart. Her hair was matted with frost, blade chipped, arm in a sling she had refused to tighten. Below her, Bruma's last wall was lined with oil barrels and burning pitch. "Mages!" she called. 4 voices responded, each muttered in a different tongue. The wind did not scatter their spells. It carried them. Fire coiled around their hands and surged forward. The tower flared in reply, not in pain, in recognition. Lightning lanced from its core and struck the parapet. Stone exploded. 2 of the mages vanished. The others staggered, smoke rising from their skin. But the pitch caught fire, and the siege tower saw it. It slowed, not in hesitation, in calculation. Inside the walls, Martin moved. He no longer carried the Daedric blade. He held a relic now, a staff older than any war, carved with the seal of Riemann, gifted by the monk who had waited at the chapel edge through all the snow. It glowed now, not brightly, but consistently. He raised it once and drove it into the earth. A ring of light expanded outward, not flame, not shockwave, a soundless line. Those it touched steadied. Some rose, some wept. One child, hidden beneath a cart, stopped shaking. The tower raised its right arm, a hammer of bound metal and volcanic stone. And Martin stepped forward, not alone. The hero who had closed the first gate stepped beside him. No command passed between them, only intent. Martin nodded, and the hero ran toward the tower, toward the opening maw, toward the gate within the gate, the portal at the heart of the machine, still pulsing. The sigil stone waited, not with malice, with cost. The interior of the tower was alive, not with breath, with intention. Walls of twisted metal groaned with every step. Chains pulsed like veins. The heat was not fire, but command, saturating the air until skin itched with proximity to something that did not belong in the world. The hero moved upward. He did not run. He ascended. Each step burned, not from pain, from knowing. Clanfear prowled the inner ramparts. One leapt from a perch above, claws aimed for the throat, and met steel without hesitation. It fell, convulsing. Another circled wide and retreated, not in fear, in deference. The tower wanted him to reach the top, and so he did. At the summit, the gate opened again, not to Tamriel, to Oblivion. Through it, a sky of cracked stone and molten storms, a place not made, but punished into existence. Beyond the portal, a throne of teeth, but at its edge, the sigil stone, suspended above a pillar of flame. The hero stepped close. He did not speak. He reached. The moment his fingers touched the stone, the tower screamed. Not a sound, a memory. Every gate, every death, every soul consumed in fire. They passed through him, like wind through a broken gate. The world spun, and the light drew inward. In Bruma, the tower staggered. Flames collapsed into themselves. The chain arch flailed, snapping cables, pulling spires inward like a dying god curling into ash. Renault shouted to fall back. The soldiers ran. Martin turned from the wall and whispered one word. Now. The tower collapsed in a column of red and black. No explosion, only reversal. A silence so sudden it struck the ear like thunder. The sigil stone was gone, and with it, the tower. In the crater, nothing burned, only smoke and stone Ash drifted in slow spirals where the tower had stood. It did not fall. It settled, as if uncertain whether it still belonged in the air. The battlefield was quiet, not victorious, surviving. Smoke coiled in the hollows between shattered ramparts. A broken shield lay in the mud, its crest half burned, the other half held by a hand that no longer moved. Nearby, a sword stood planted into the earth, not by its bearer, but by impact. Martin walked through it all. He stepped over fallen beams, past bodies already covered by blankets torn from tents. His hand brushed the edge of a spear, and for a moment the wood felt warm. He looked up. Above him, the sky had cleared, but only directly above. A perfect circle of blue, bordered by red-stained cloud, as if Oblivion had receded, but not retreated. At the heart of the crater, a figure emerged, staggering, covered in soot, alive, the hero. The crowd did not cheer. They made way. One by one, heads bowed, not in triumph, in recognition. He walked straight to Martin, held out the sigil stone. It was cracked, but still burning from within. Slow, deliberate pulses, like a dying star refusing to vanish. Martin took it in both hands. He did not flinch. He looked into the light, and did not blink. "Now we know what it costs," he said. Renault stepped forward, arm still in sling. "And what it buys?" Martin answered, without looking at her. "Time." Night fell slower than usual, as if the sky, too, needed time to grieve. Bruma's walls held, but nothing within them had remained untouched. Fires still glowed in the lower ward, not from siege, from ritual. Families lit them in silence, placing tokens of the fallen in the ash. Rings, scraps of cloth, one child's carved flute that had never been played. No names were spoken. The quiet did not ask for them. It held them. In the citadel's upper chamber, the war table remained open, but the maps had been pushed aside. In their place, the cracked sigil stone, still pulsing, not weaker, resolved. Martin stood before it, alone, not in solitude, in necessity. The door opened behind him. Renault entered, armor off, sling gone, though her shoulder had not fully mended. She did not salute. "Casualty lists are being drawn," she said. He didn't turn. "Burn them." She blinked. "What?" "Burn them," he repeated. Their deaths weren't currency. They were offerings. A pause. Then, softly, "And I'll carry their weight better if I don't try to count it." She said nothing more. She stepped to the side of the table, watched the stone, its glow reflected in her eyes. "So what now?" she asked. Martin closed his eyes. When he opened them, the air in the room felt thinner, not drained, prepared. "Now," he said, "we walk to the heart." "To the city?" "No," he answered. "To the end." Below, the fires dimmed. The wind shifted, and in the east, the sky flickered red once more, not with threat, with invitation. The imperial city stood still, not from peace, from waiting. Its towers caught no wind. The banners above the temple of the One did not move. Even the waters of Lake Rumari lay flat, as if the world had forgotten how to ripple. At the city gates, the blades stood ready, not in ranks, in remembrance. Behind them, the allies, the pilgrims, the mages with silent tongues, the soldiers who had marched from Bruma with ash in their boots. No one called orders, no one prayed. There was nothing left to ask, only arrival. Martin stepped through the gate alone. The cracked sigil stone hung at his side in a binding of cloth and gold wire. His robe had been torn at the shoulder, but no one dared mend it. The tear had become part of him. His footfalls rang clear against the stone. No echo, just weight. He passed the market square, where the fruit stalls had once stood. He passed the chapel steps, where a beggar had sung in 6 tongues. He passed the high archway, where the statue of Saint Alessia had crumbled 2 nights before, not struck, but bowed, and he walked toward the temple of the One. The doors had been sealed, not by hands, by something older, but as he approached, the locks crumbled. No key, no command, just recognition. He stepped through. Inside, silence, columns lined in red gold, ceilings etched with constellations no longer visible, and in the center, the altar where the dragonfires once burned. They did not burn now. They waited. Martin approached the altar. He unwrapped the sigil stone. It pulsed, faint but insistent, as if it knew. He lifted the amulet of kings. Its chain had snapped weeks before. Its gem had dulled, but now, in his hand, it brightened, not into fire, into memory. He looked up, and the sky opened. Not metaphor. The sky, split like fabric, held too long against strain, and through it stepped Mehrunes Dagon. Mehrunes Dagon did not descend. He entered. 1 foot at a time, each step crackened stone that had never known fracture. The city quaked, not in collapse, but in recognition. Columns bowed, roofs groaned. The great bridge to the Arboretum split along its center line. He was not a creature. He was not a king. He was scale. Red flesh wound in cords of thunder. 4 arms, 2 relaxed, 2 reaching. Eyes like molten glyphs. Horns curved back, as if to crown the void behind him. His voice did not speak. It resonated, a wordless pulse that drove birds from the trees and blood from the ears of those who dared look skyward. The blades did not flee. They lowered their swords, not in surrender, in acknowledgement. Renault stood unmoving at the outer gate. Her voice did not rise above the roar, but Martin heard her. All things break, Septim, even gods. He stepped toward the altar. Mehrunes took another step. The temple shook. A spire collapsed behind Martin. Dust curled through the golden light and stopped short of him, as if held back by breath alone. He lifted the amulet of kings. The sigil stone burned in his other hand, not in heat, but in definition, its shape sharpening beyond mortal vision. The 2 objects did not resist. They met. The world held. And Martin spoke his only word. It was not in Cyrodiilic. It was not in any tongue remembered by man. But the stones understood and ignited. Flame burst outward, not from the altar, from within, From Martin. His body arched, not in pain, in transformation. Fire spilled from his chest. His hands opened. His skin did not burn. It shone. And in the heart of the temple, where once emperors prayed and prophets bled, something ancient woke. The temple did not collapse. It opened. The walls folded inward like wings returning to rest. The ceiling cracked, not from weight, but from light. A white gold brilliance pouring from the altar, as if the sun itself had found its origin. Martin was no longer standing. He was becoming. His form lifted, suspended between sky and stone, fire wrapping around him like armor shaped from breath. His eyes, once human, now held the glint of the amulet's crystal, refracting not color, but intent. Below, Mehrunes Dagon raised a hand. Not to strike, to challenge. There was no roar, no monologue, only motion, swift and final. His fist closed over the temple spire and met resistance, not from stone, from formless pressure, from dragon shape made of memory and oath and blood. From Martin, the fire spiraled outward, forming jaws that curved through the sky, translucent and massive. Wings of gold flame snapped open above the city, shadowing towers, sweeping clouds into spiral. A dragon, wrought not from flesh, but from inheritance. Akatosh, not summoned, not borrowed, revealed. Martin's voice rang out. No words, only purpose. He struck, not at the god's crown, at its core. Mehrunes staggered, not wounded, but pierced by truth he could not consume. His claws grasped flame, found legacy, and burned. Stone shattered below. Wind raced in. The heavens folded in on themselves, and in one blinding instant, red gave way to gold. The sky did not explode. It released. The golden blaze folded inward, condensing into a single point above the temple, a flame no larger than a man's heart, pulsing once, then vanishing. Silence followed. True silence. The kind that exists only when something immense has left. The ruins of the temple steamed in the new light. Stone cracked, not shattered. The altar was gone. The ceiling open to a sky no longer red. And in the center, where Martin had stood, nothing. No ash, no remains. Only a circle burned into the floor, a perfect ring, still warm. Mehrunes Dagon was gone, not slain, dismissed. The city exhaled, soldiers knelt, not in victory, in disbelief. Renault reached the temple steps, blood streaking her temple. One gauntlet cracked open. She scanned the rubble for a sign. A fragment, anything. There was none, only the warmth. She knelt by the ring and placed one hand at its edge. She did not pray, but she bowed her head. Behind her, the blades gathered. No ranks, no formality, just presence. One by one, the others arrived. The hero who closed the gate, the child who carried the torch, the mage with scars from Kvatch. None spoke. The fires no longer burned, but something held in the air, a presence, not watching, remaining. Far above, the sun broke fully through the clouds. No horns sounded, but the wind shifted and carried a single line from a monk, far down in the market district. He whispered it to no one, but it reached all. The dragon has remembered. Dawn came without flourish. No trumpets, no banners, just light, soft, steady, pressing through the cracked windows of the white gold tower, falling in slow beams across stone worn by centuries of kings, and none to follow. The throne room stood empty, but not hollow. Dust hung in the air, like breath stilled mid-chant. At the foot of the dais, a single blade rested, not planted, placed. Its hilt bore the mark of the blades. Its edge, dulled by war, glinted where flame had touched it, and left behind something not quite scorch, not quite blessing. Outside, the streets of the imperial city began to stir. Doors opened, not many, not fast, just enough to prove that the world still moved. A merchant swept his stall, though no goods remained. A child picked up a stone shaped like an eye, and smiled. The mage who once fled Kvatch walked alone to the temple's edge, and placed a single white feather on the step where the stone circle had cooled, then turned and said nothing. In Bruma, snow fell again, but softer. At Waynon Priory, a bell rang once, unbidden, untouched, and at the edge of the city, where the gate to the west opened onto the long road beyond the Niben, a guard looked up and saw a bird flying east, not a raven, a hawk. Its wings caught the gold of morning and vanished. The white gold tower stood still, no guards at its base, no stewards pacing the corridor, no scrolls passed hand to hand in whispered haste, only the slow tick of dust drifting through a shaft of broken light, descending from a skylight long thought unbreachable. No one sat the throne. It was not abandoned. It had been fulfilled. The stone beneath it bore new grooves, shallow, concentric, as if something had pressed into the marble, not with weight, but with meaning. The amulet of kings was not there. It had not been lost. It had done what it was made to do. A scroll lay open on the steps. Its words had faded, rewritten by flame and silence. One line remained: rain ends, fire endures. In the far gallery, a clerk returned to his bench. He had not written for 3 days. His ink had dried. He opened a fresh pot and waited. Outside, bells rang, not the peal of coronation, not the toll of mourning, but a new rhythm, lower, slower, the sound of a world, remembering how to walk forward. A courier paused at the threshold. She looked once at the throne, eyes tracing the dust line where a crown had once rested, then turned and walked out. Her footsteps echoed far too loud for such a small hall, but no one hushed them, because the throne room was not empty. It was listening.